Hello class, this is Professor Nelson with the Jewelry Design Department of the Fashion Institute of Technology, adding another tutorial to our series on 2D drawing in Rhino. We're going to be working on our tracing exercise, continuing along. So this should look familiar to you. Going to bring up the image, hopefully, if all goes well. There we go. And I'm going to begin by doing what I did in class last week, and that is draw this scrolled element. Begin by using offset curves, through point, and grabbing on the bottom. And the top of the motif, and going to do side to side, through point both sides to get the maximum width of this bounding box, basically, that defines the boundary of my object. Going to trim using fillets. Make sure the radius is set to 0. Mine already is, but if it weren't, I would click on that and type in 0. Select the side you want to keep. This is the opposite of trim. In trim, you select your cutting objects, and then you click on what you want to throw away. With fillet, you execute the command, and then you click on the side of the curve you wish to keep. And I'm just repeating the command by hitting spacebar or right click. Okay, so I have my box. Now I want to establish the width of this element. And I'll do a compromise because it isn't exactly symmetrical, as you can see. And I want to establish the bottom of these loops. And that should give me, and establish a reference curve for the widest part of this bottom loop, which is right here. Going to use the fillet curve to blunt off this end. Going to use a trim command using this vertical green reference curve as a cutting tool. Trim off that corner right there. I have a couple of ways we covered in class to create this segment. I can use a blend curve. We're going to use the adjustable blend curve. Select curve to blend. Select your second curve to blend. And then adjust these handles, starting with the outermost handles to see how close you can come. If you have to adjust the inner handles a little, you can. Okay, that's one way to create that geometry. I'll put that on a storage layer for now. The other way to create that geometry is a conic, which is a segment of an arc. Remember, when we start our conic, we always want to have tangents, so click on tangent, select your first curve, and then where you want the conic to begin from. And we want it to begin from the end of that curve. End of conic. You can click anywhere. It's not specifying another curve because conics don't need curve reference information unless it's going to be tangent. Once you click tangent, it'll ask for the second curve. And it'll ask for a point that is the end of the conic, which will be the end there. I will zoom in. And now you can rubber band out and create the exact conic that you want. I prefer the way my conic looks I think this is a little more graceful than the pink curve behind it. So I'll delete the pink one. Now, to create this curve, I'm going to use a series of extend by arc to point commands. Curve, extend curve, by arc to point. I'm going to drag this up as far as it'll go comfortably, and then I'll click. In Rhino 5, they allow you to stay in command and just keep clicking the end of the curve to add another segment. It's a quick way to do a rough sketch of a curve. Enter to finish the command. This is a poly curve right now. It's not one piece, it's several joined together, as we talked about in class. I want to rebuild it. When you rebuild a poly curve, it becomes one single curve. I want 4th degree, which is right, is what I have. 15, that's actually not bad. I'll stay with that. And now I have a rebuilt curve. I want to go back and show you the difference mathematically. Turning on the control points. Turning on the curvature graph. You can see each one of these steps is a curve segment. Independent curve joined together. I'm going to rebuild and watch what happens both to the control points and to the curve. It becomes one smooth object. Okay. I am going to go ahead and remove that curvature graph because our next step is to just freehand trace this. So I'm going to use M-Enter. Clicks anywhere away from the geometry so my cursor doesn't block my view of what I'm doing. And that looks pretty good. Now I'll put the curvature graph back on and see if I can make these transitions a little smoother. It's clear this needed to go wider than thinner because of the speed of the curve. When the curve is a slow curve, that means a long curve. You'll have a very shallow graph. As the curve makes sharp corners, that's called a faster curve, you're going to get more of a flare. That's fine. But you want the transition from flare to shallow to be somewhat graceful. Kill yourself over it. Hold on, please. Sorry, I thought somebody was at my door. I've locked myself away in my office. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is to reestablish tangency down here at the bottom. I'm going to do the same exercise we did to create 3 points in a row in class last week. Going to use point object snap. And instead of clicking out here in the background with my M-Enter, I want to move from a specific point to a specific point. I want to move this point from its current location, so I'm going to snap right onto it and snap to the end of this curve, leaving it selected. And I do that by making sure I do not click in the background. I'm going to repeat the move command. Now I can click anywhere I want. Okay. And this point can be moved, but it's important that it's done in ortho in a straight line. So I'm going to hold down ortho. Now something I did not discuss in class last week is that when you want the portion of a circle if you'd want to avoid the effect of a flattening here, you want to bring that curve fairly tight in, and you can see what happens to the curvature graph. If your curvature graph is dipping way down, you're too far out. Ideally, if you can do it, it's nice to get your curvature graph to where it's almost going straight. I want to show you how that actually looks in another way. I'm going to mirror this curve over. Using history, and that means you're going to use history, hold down ortho. So now there's a copy of it over here. Once history's been enabled, both sides will update at the same time. And you can see what happens to the rounding. It is tangent once I bring these 2 points. Right now it is not tangent. There's a subtle point there. See how they both updated together? And now I will move a little bit more. Okay, see this shape? Watch that shape. If it begins to flatten out like a potato, that's not nice. Usually the most circular, the most arc-like, is a fairly straight line. And from there, if we wanted, we could actually adjust that point a little. But there's no need. I think this is fine. That's plenty. Now I'm just being crazy. All right. By the way, if you ever want to turn your points off, you can hit F11, or you can just tap Escape key twice. Bringing back the bitmap. I want to offset this curve to create this thickness of wire. Through point, as always, T enter, and click. Now I can see that in the piece, this is actually a little thinner and then a little fatter. It's actually a little thinner here too and fatter there. Do I want it consistent, or do I want it to be graduated like that? I'm going to keep it consistent in mind. If you'll allow me, I am tired of changing having to type in. It's already there. That's interesting, because whenever I've typed in the shortcut for mirror, oh, there it is. Okay. Sorry, guys. I just want to be able to mirror without using the keyboard. Without using the menus, which isn't very nice to you anyway. Mirror 0 for the center. Pull straight up in order to mirror straight across. Remember, you pull straight across if you want to mirror up and down. Okay. I'm going to turn off the bitmap. I want you to look at this. See that flat? That is not pretty. So, I'm going to undo that mirror. I'm going to mirror again, but I'm going to record history so that I can see both sides. I'm going to add this to the curvature graph. When you see lots of little lines, it means you have lots of control points. That means it's a dense curve. I'm going to rebuild. Right-clicking in the command line, I can get it off my recent commands. Yeah, there are 35 points on there, and there's no need for more than maybe 18. Okay. Both of those curves updated at the same time. Turn my control points on with F10. I'm going to grab that next to the end point, move it onto the end, creating that point once again, and then I'm going to move it slightly out. Until I have a graceful flow along the bottom. Now if I want to, I can sweeten this curve a little to get rid of some of those irregularities in the curvature graph. Once again, don't kill yourselves. It's nice to know that your curve is mathematically smooth, but it's not worth taking a whole lot of time over, because the only person who will know your curve is mathematically smooth is you. Okay? If I add that, you can see that its graph is the same. I'm going to actually just throw that away. Okay. So, I've created this first part of the scrolled element. I'm going to delete this line. I no longer need it. I'm going to delete this line. I no longer need it. I'm going to delete this line and this line, because they just defined the width, which I've already finished. Turn on my bitmap. Now I want to draw these curves here. I can tell that this is probably not going to be terribly useful to me. It's already a little off. So I'm going to clip this off. I'm going to do that by coming to my curve, line, perpendicular from a curve. Perpendicular means it will come off this curve at a perpendicular. It will automatically snap onto that line, or any line I snap it onto, I touch. And once I do that, you click your first time, and read the command line. Start of line. Click on the curve. Until you click end of line, you can slide this along wherever you want. It's a good idea to disable your object snaps, though. Otherwise, the end's going to try and snap onto every piece of geometry it gets near. I'm going to come up right before this hits the highest point for both the inside and the outside curve. Somewhere in here. Okay? And I'm going to trim it. Should I trim it with a trim, or should I trim it with a fillet curve? I think I'll do a fillet trim. Select the part I want to keep. Rhino just let me know that I broke the history on this. Now my question is, if I'd have trimmed instead, would I have? No. Watch over here when I hit enter. Oh, yes it did. Either way, it breaks history. So I'm going to have to either mirror this over, which I'm not going to bother doing. Oh, I will. It's tidy. I'm going to mirror it straight over, and I'm going to use this to trim the other side. You only have to draw one side of this object and then mirror it over. But I'm making aesthetic decisions that involve both sides, partially because of the asymmetry, and largely because this is one of the few elements of the piece that's right down the center line. I can now delete those two trim curves. I'm going to use the extend by arc to point command again to sketch these curves. Select curve to extend. Choose the end of your extension. Take it as far as it's useful, no further. Continue by clicking the end of the curve as far as it's useful. You can already see it's getting ugly. I know I'm going to rebuild and fine-tune this, so I'm not terribly concerned about that. And now I'm going to use my near object snap. So I can grab onto this line somewhere about there. Actually, I think I'll grab it just below. In fact, I'm going to grab it right at that intersection. I'll use an intersection object snap instead. So that's my curve. Now obviously I need to rebuild this in order for it to look nice. But I don't want to rebuild what I've already done. This I've already made really pretty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explode. And I'm going to right click at about where the end of this curve is. And I happen to know because I can see the end of this one. It's about there. So I'll come back a little bit and I'll right click. Right clicking with this as a selection technique, remember what that does. If I want to, not right clicking, control, left click. If I want to remove something from a selection, I hold down the control key. If I want to add it, I hold the shift key. I want to remove this segment, so I'm going to hold down control and left click. Now I want these to be joined back together again into one fluid curve. So I will do that. And now I'm going to rebuild. Usually when you have a circle, you want somewhere close to 20 points. This is a little longer. Plus, it's already 19 points at 2 degrees as a secondary curve. I'm going to probably take that to 20. See what I get. Preview. That's fine. Now, this needs to come off of this smoothly. So I'm going to split my vertical reference curve. Instead of trimming, I'm splitting. Remember the difference. Splitting doesn't remove any part of the curve, it just breaks it. Trimming breaks the curve and throws away the part you don't want. I'm already pre-selected, as we're doing per class vote. So it's already gone through the first stage where it asks me what do I want split. It's asking me what do I want to split it with. I'm going to split it with this blue curve. And then enter when done. I'll hit enter. And it breaks that curve very nicely. Now I want this curve to come smooth off of that curve. I have several options how to do that. Okay? I can do what we've done with the other curve and drag the line, use the 2 points and match them up and drag them. I'm going to try something different this time. First I'm going to delete these 2 sub-anchor points. Control points, remove. Remember, you have to repeat the command each time you want to do it. And that's it. I'm going to ask Rhino to match this curve to the segment of our green vertical reference curve. You do that by going to Edit, going to Curve, Curve Edit Tools, and Match. Select an open curve to change. Anything that's not a circle or a square, anything that's not joined into closed geometry, and we've talked about that. As long as you can see the 2 ends of the curve, as long as you can see one end of the curve, it's an open curve. So I'm going to select this, and now it asks for an open curve to match it to. And you could also do an edge of a surface, but we're going to go with a curve. Pick here. Now it asks how much do you want it to match. Do you want it to match in curvature? Do you want it to match in tangency? Do you want it to match in position? I'm going to turn off the background bitmap so you can see the differences. It's easier just to find it off this drop-down menu. Okay, you see this black line? It's telling you what's going to happen. Curvature makes two control points down the line, these two, fall into place. Actually, it's these two right here. That's the end. Okay? It's going to make it a straight segment. Remember, straight is 3 in a row. Tangency is 2 in a row. So if you click curvature, it's going to affect 2 of the control points at the end of your curve. If you click tangency, it's going to affect 1. Down here, it asks, do you want to preserve the other end of the curve? This is a long curve, so that wouldn't really make much of a difference. But if this, and it's open at that end, but if this was supposed to be smooth to this curve, for example, which it is, but it no longer is. Once I rebuilt it, I lost that. But let's say it was locked in as being preserved there. I could ask it to preserve tangency or curvature, or to ignore preservation. I want it to stay in the same place. I don't care about curvature continuity right now, continuity, but I want it to stay in its position, which is Rhino's default on the preserve the other end option. Hit OK, and there's my curve. Turn on the bitmap and drag these around by eye. Enter. We're doing relative positioning, and where we pick something, hit move, click in the background to get our first point, and then click a relative point to that so Rhino knows where you're trying to go. And try and make something nice. Okay, and at this point I'm no longer really interested in the bitmap. Turn on the curvature graph. You can see it's pretty erratic. Now I have a couple of choices here. Okay, I can work with this the way it is, or I can rebuild it. If I rebuild this curve, it'll automatically smooth it out somewhat because it'll put the control points at even distribution along the curve. So you decide each time you do this, do I want to rebuild it again, get it smoother, or do I want to use my hand and adjust it? I'll try rebuilding it to show you the difference it makes. I'll keep it at 18, what it already is. See how it smoothed it out? Now in that process, I lost tangency here, and I'd already lost tangency there, but we won't worry about that right now. Because if you think about it, I had just showed you a very clever way to restore tangency that requires no effort at all. Now, it's kind of important to me how this looks on both sides. So once again, because we're working with a curve that's along the center line, I'm going to mirror it. Center of mirror, 0. And as long as you haven't clicked at the end of the command, you can still choose to record history. As long you can do that before the command, you can do it during the command, but once you've completed the command, you cannot. Because I kind of want to see what's happening with this shape, this negative shape between these two. Okay, that's pretty nice. Not bad. Now I want to offset it. Use your end object snap so you can snap to the end of that curve. Now that's the right thickness, but it's going to be a messy curve mathematically. Turning on the control points, look at all those. Would you really want to go in and adjust each one of those? I do not think so. We're going to rebuild it. Yeah, 18 and 4, just like the parent curve we offset from. Should be fine. And I'm going to go in and remove these anchor points, sub-anchor points. Uh-oh, wrong one. That one. That one. Bring up my bitmap. Using it as a bit of a reference, because I've changed this curvature to make it more attractive to my own tastes, so being right on that bitmap is not so important to me anymore. Especially up here, because I know that it's all changed. It's symmetrical. I'm going to put on my curvature graph. See, in order to make that smooth, I had to do something pretty radical. I don't want that to happen. So, once again, to get rid of some of these big bulbousness, dramatic curvature issues, I'm going to rebuild. And I'm going to give a little more. It's got 16 now. If I put the 18 back, it's just going to put those anchor points back at the ends, which I can remove again. But I'm going to make it 20, because I would like a little more control through here. Watch what that does to that control curve, to that analysis graph. I am going to go ahead and remove that. That. And now I can adjust this. Try and get a little nicer curvature. Once again, not going to go crazy. Hide the bitmap. And that's good enough. Now we have a problem, however. The ends of this don't match. The ends of this are no longer tangent. This and this are no longer tangent. I'm going to fix all of those. I'm going to use match curve. Select open curve to change. Select open curve to match. Now you have a choice we didn't use before, where automatically it's going to change the first curve you pick. So it's important which order you pick your curves in. Of course, the command line makes that clear. It asks you what curve do you want to change, what curve do you want to match. However, Maybe I don't want to just change one curve. Maybe I want it to average them out. I can do that. Zoom so you can see what's happening. These are the two curves. You can see that this one's dropped down to meet this one. But if I would like it to average, this curve comes up a little, that curve comes down a little, which is sometimes nice. That's what I'm going to use here. This curve, same thing. Pick which curve to change, the newest one. Pick which one to match. That's how it looks averaging it. That's how it looks not averaging it. This one I kind of like not averaging. Fine. This one I know I don't want to average because I want this to be true tangent to a straight line. So fine. Now it's done. Now, just to make our lives easy, anything that we can click on the right side of this bar, except for that, we're going to delete those two curves. And we're going to delete this curve so that we have one motif that we can mirror over. We're going to join this together. We're going to mirror it. Start of mirror plane 0. Pull straight up in order to mirror straight across. And we're going to join these together. Okay? We no longer need any of our outline. Okay. Going to turn on our bitmap. There we go. Now you have over and under across here. We're going to go ahead and trim this out. Now, if you were going to model this, you would not do this. If you were going to model this, you would actually keep all of the curves and you would do your over and under trimming in the surfaces because you need to create a nice smooth surface off this. But because what we're making is a drawing, we will trim it out. So I'm going to use trim command. Select these two as your trim tools. Trim this out from behind. Keep it lit up. We're going to trim. Oh, that didn't work, so no. We'll stop. Okay. When we tried to trim over here, no, okay, now it worked. It just I couldn't combine them in the same command, or Rhino got confused. It does that. So there's the over. Now this one is passing over this one. So pre-select our cutting tools. Select the part you don't want to keep. And that was backwards. See, I actually wanted to keep that. So repeat it. I wanted to remove this piece. Okay. Now this goes over and under this beam. So I'm going to use this beam as a trim tool. And I'm going to trim away this and this. But then the beam passes behind it. So I'm going to select all of these curves that overlap at all. I'm going to repeat the trim command, and I'm going to trim out. Click on anything that is being overlapped. Enter when done. And now I'm going to change the color to blue. Just like so. I want to recreate this segmental line, but I'm not going to do a circle. I just want a straight here. So I'm going to do curve. Actually, I'll do an offset with my construction. Offset curve, through point. I will catch the bottom edge of this circle. You know what? I think it would be prettier if it was the circle. So I take that back. I want to draw this circle. Now I have a few ways I can do that, but the most straightforward is to create curve, circle, 2 points. Using my near object snap, I'll pick the first point, the beginning of the diameter, right here, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key to lock in ortho, and I'm going to zoom out and pan down until I have enough room to capture that circle. Of course, I could have also simply offset this curve, but I think there's a slight difference in radii. I'm going to take this curve. I could offset it, but I'll bet the ends wouldn't touch. These are already tangent to a straight line, I know that. So I'm going to just copy. Oh, except for I'm in an evaluation which won't let me. So I'll offset. I could have done both sides and saved that extra click, but that's fine. Let's see if they line up. Actually, they do. So I'll join. Oh, see? Rhino says they don't really join. So I'll match. I don't care which one I pick first because I'm going to average the curves. Now I'll join. And I'll join. This one I'm not going to join because I wouldn't know which one to join it to, because they both come into this point. But I will change its color to blue. I did that by going to Edit Layers, Change Object Layer. I want to trim these off with this. I want to just cap it. So I'm going to use Fillet, if I still got it here. Nope, it's been too long. So Curve Menu, Fillet Curves, make sure it's set to 0. Click the parts I want to keep. Okay. It wouldn't fillet the circle because it's a closed curve. So to get that, I'm going to have to do a trim. Click the part I do not wish to keep. And I will join this together. So now I have this. I'm going to trim out this archway underneath. And that's that. Put it on the blue layer. That's been drawn in completion. Okay. The next part I'm going to draw is the tulip. So since I'm going to draw this tulip, I'm going to create a box around it using offset curves. Through point, catch the tip. Through point, catch the heel. Through point both sides. Capture the width. Fill it. Okay. Offset through point. Capture the point of that cleavage. that inside corner as well. And the top. I'm going to use this curve, through point both sides, to capture the width right there. Use a trim command using those two curves just to tidy up. There. That's my drawing box. I'm going to draw, by the way, I have just noticed that I wasn't zoomed in very tight when I did that. I'm going to mirror this using the record history. And now when I move one, I'll move the other. Watch the one that's not selected. See how it moves too? Just so I can find that point. There. That's better. Okay. So I want to draw this curve, and the best way to draw that curve is going to be interpolate curve freeform. I want to turn off my object snaps, so either disable them here or set a keyboard shortcut to it. I use X Enter. We can discuss that in class. I'm going to start, actually, I want it back on for just a minute. I'm going to start this at this intersection. Now I'll disable them. I'm going to carry it out beyond the end. I'm going to draw the other side of it also. Click, 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 and I'm going to take it beyond. Okay? I'm going to do this. I know I want it to pass through here, but I'm going to start a little below there. And there's a little bit of a reverse curve in this. I'm going to try and capture that. And I don't want it to come right to a point here, because that's basically a rounded off point, guys. When you have a rounded off point, just make it a regular point, but take it farther out. I'm going to use near object snap. I didn't have to. I could have just pulled it farther across. But that's fine. Enter. I'm going to rebuild my curves now. I'm going to rebuild this one. A curve that size with that much curvature is probably a 9. So edit, rebuild for 9. This one's probably about a 16 or 17. This one is probably about a 9 as well. Once again, you get that from experience more than anything. Now I'm going to turn on the points for this one. Before I do, I'm going to mirror it over using recorded history, because once again this element breaks the center line. So transform, mirror, 0 for the center. I already clicked record history. You can tell because it was in bold type. And now I'll turn on the control points, and I will adjust them using the relative positioning with the mouse, where I click in the background. And it's a point I would normally remove, but I'll hang on to it for now. It's a little shallow in there. Okay. I want you to do each step for each curve. We're going to record these over too, and record the history with the mirror. Turn on the control points. Okay. These points, this one's a little too, yeah, these are still too close, so I'm going to remove those control points. I'm going to do it the easy way by selecting and deleting. Gives you a little more jagged effect, but usually it's fine. Okay, now I'm going to sketch with these control points. You'll notice that the curve on the right over there updates right along with me. But it's nice to be able to see it, especially as I come down into the center here, so I can see what it's doing. We don't want a sharp point on this, so I'm going to pull it beyond the boundary, keep a sharp corner, but I'll address that sharp corner in a few minutes. All right. There. So the next stage is curvature analysis. Pick our top one. F10 to turn on the points. This isn't bad. I can tweak it a little there. And I can tweak it back here, but I'm going to trim this off. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time perfecting a part of the curve I'm not going to ever see. Remove this object. Add this object. Turn on the control points for this curve. Actually turn off the points, then add the points for this curve. This one I can improve. Okay, turn off the control points on that curve, turn them on for this one, remove this curve from the curvature graph, add this curve to the curvature graph. Take a look. Something really dramatic happening here. This is kind of crazy enough that I'm going to rebuild this curve. There are currently 15 points on it. I'll give it 16. See how that my math a little for me? And you'll notice it rebuilt the other side too. Anything you do to one side, it'll do to the other if you have that record history on when you make the command. However, if you break it, Rhino will tell you. If you do something like a trim, which doesn't usually break history. I don't know why it did on our last thing we were working on. Okay, there's a limit to how crazy I want to get with it. And that's the limit right there. Okay, so now I'm going to trim. Select that, trim that. See how it trimmed it over here too? Select that, trim that. Fixed it over there. Trim this one. See, now for some reason that broke history. I don't know why. Sometimes trimming does, sometimes trimming doesn't. So, oh, didn't want to trim that. Wanted to trim that. So that's now done. We can delete all of our reference lines. But now we want to soften some corners. This corner we can leave sharp. These we can't. The way we're going to remove those is we're going to go circle, center radius. We're going to turn on our end object snap and just draw a small circle. Here we're going to draw an even smaller circle. We'll mirror this circle over. Select all three circles. Use them as trim tools. Trim off the points. Enter when finished. Rhino's going to keep being angry because we're trimming things that are ruining their history, but we don't care. We're done with the history. Hit delete if you've already selected these, so you can just throw them away. Now, how can we make a point on this? The same way we were making points. We created the bottom of this curve. We're going to use blend and conic. We'll use a blend curve for the point here. Remember, we want adjustable blend curve. Curve to blend. Curve to blend. There you go. Pull on the farthest out point to sweeten it a little bit. That's fine. We're going to mirror that over. 0 for the start of the mirror plane. Here, since it has to be symmetrical, you always want to use a conic. This didn't have to be symmetrical from side to side. In fact, you didn't want it to. You wanted to be able to have this organic feel. But when you want both of these to come up to a rounded, blunted point, conic must be used. Conic. Remember, whenever we're going to use a conic, we're going to want to use a tangent. Select the curve. Start of the conic. With your end object snap selected, click. End of conic. We want that tangent as well. So it's going to ask to select the second curve and the point at which you want to end your conic. You now have your rubber band. Pull that down to a nice rounded corner and you're done. We've drawn the tulip portion. Okay. And I think this is a good point to stop this tutorial at. I'm going to change this to the blue layer. Well, you know what? I have a few more minutes, so I'll keep drawing. I take that back. So, what to draw next? I'm going to draw this floral motif. I'm going to draw the center with a circle. Center, radius, circle. I'll click in what I think is the visual center. I'll pull it out. That's too small. I mean, too large. So I'll do it again. I actually want it a little undersized, because what I'm going to do now is rebuild it. I'm going to rebuild it as a 4th degree curve. 16 points is fine. Remember, we want a divisible of 4. Actually, 12 would be fine. And turn on the points. And just pull on them. Because what it's wanting to do is to go up into each one of these petals a little bit. Doesn't have to be precise. But that's kind of a nice effect. We're not going to use a curvature graph or anything because this isn't supposed to be smooth. Okay, we're going to draw this petal. We're going to use Interpolate Points. We're going to disable our object snaps. We're going to start inside of that circle element. Trace it as best we can. Go past the point. Start inside. Past the point. Start inside. Past the point. Start on the inside. Past the point. Start over here. Past the point. Going to start this petal over here. Past the point. Start inside the circle. Past the point. Start inside the circle. You'll notice that the more detailed I want to get, the more often I have to click. Start inside the circle. Pass the point. Start inside. Pass the point inside. Pass the point inside. Pass the point inside. Pass the point inside the circle. Pass the point inside the circle. And inside the circle. Now we're inside of the intersection, the cleavage there. Pass the point. Inside corner. Pass the corner. Begin inside the corner. And then pass the point. There. Next thing we have to do is rebuild curves. So we're going to start with the very simplest curves. That's these two. And I'm going to want to change these to a different layer as I rebuild them so I know which ones I've done. Those are going to be 3-4 curves. That's third degree 4-point curves. I know I almost always do fourth degree curves, but for a very small segment that you want to stay very smooth, 3-4 is perfect. You will notice it basically changes them not at all, but it makes them a little smoother. And I'm going to put those on bright green. My next smoothest curves. Short, simple curvature. Oh, this is another. This is another. This is another. These could all be rebuilt as 3-4. Okay. Complicated. Not a lot more complicated. Even though this is a bigger curve, it's the same simplicity. So is this. So is that. Okay. I'm going to rebuild those. But now I'll go 4. As you can see, they're pulling away. It's not nearly enough math for those curves. So I'll go 4, 8. And that's fine. Put those on the bright green layer. Okay. Now, these are the next most complex curves. Oops. Going to rebuild those to about a 12, 412. My really kind of crazy, this one could also be, these could easily also be 412s. I already did them. I just didn't change the color. I thought so. Which means these two have also been rebuilt. And somehow just didn't make it into the other layer. Yeah. I messed up a little there as far as changing layers. That's why it's important to get it right, because otherwise you can get confused. How about these guys are now the most complex? Except for the center, which I'm not going to rebuild. I want to make these about a 14-point curve. Put those on the dark green layer, the bright green layer. Okay. So now I'm at the step of sketching. So turn on the points. I've overtaken the edge. I don't have to worry about those secondary anchor points. And that's more than enough points to control this curve. That's fine. Once I'm done, I'm going to put it on the bright blue layer. I'm going to start with the most complicated ones. I won't be using a curvature graph on hardly any of these, if any, because it's an organic form. It's not supposed to be mechanical at all, clean at all. Okay. Now, actually, I probably will start using curvature graphs a little on these longer swooping curves. I'm going to pick a few that aren't really close together so I can do more batch work where I come in and do a little more at a time, just in the interest of time. Because I can keep track of what I have and haven't done with 2 or 3 at a time. See, once again, by overlapping, I don't have to really worry about the tight geometry at the end of the curve. I let that just hang out there. If I want it to be a sharp corner, I'll do a fillet. If I want a rounded corner, I'll do a conic or a blend. Now I can look at the curvature graph. I'm fine with that. Okay, now the remaining curves are very loose curves. Now let's start with the more complicated ones. There are still 3 slightly more sophisticated curves. Now I could do a little more there. Okay. Now, these. Actually, those 2 overlap, so I won't pick them at the same time. Fine. Fine. Turn on my curvature graph. Just out of curiosity. It's pretty smooth out here where I'll be using it. There's some squirreliness happening over there, but I'll be trimming that away, so I don't care. This is fine. Now, I want to show you what the 3-4 curves look like. Oh, hang on, I missed a slightly more sophisticated curve. It's fine. I like it just the way it is. Oh, this is a more complicated curve stuff. Yeah, I don't need that. Okay, these are our 3-4 curves. Yeah, I want you to. I'm going to adjust them by eye, but I want to show you how these work. Why I use a 3-4, third degree fourth point curve for a short segment. Whatever I kind of do here, see how nice my curvature graph stays? It's just a very solid geometry. It's hard to make anything ugly with a 4-3 curve. So if you have a short segment, third degree fourth points is a nice way to go. And the rest of these are all 3-4 curves. So I'm just going to turn on the points and see if I want to sweeten them up at all. Put these on the blue layer. Okay. Now I'm going to use fillet. See if I've got it on my drop down. I do. Just to clean this up. Okay, which corners to keep, which ones to change. You really don't like sharp corners in jewelry, particularly on outside corners. Inside corners, it's okay. This one I think I will keep. This one I will keep. And this one I will keep. The rest I will modify. I'm going to do my circle, center radius. Where I have an area that I want pretty smooth, I'll make that a pretty large circle. In an area where I don't, I'll make a small circle. Once again, I want to really blunt that, so I'll make a big circle. This is too aggressive. This little teeny thing is important, but it can't be really sharp. So again, I'm letting all my outside corners stay and my inside corners. Okay. Trim. And if you pre-select your circles, your cutting tools, once you finish the command, they stay selected, so you can just hit delete to remove them. I missed this one. Okay, blend versus conic. It varies. Here is obviously a blend, because you want a very organic feel right there. I mean, I could have drawn it with control points, but it would have been iffy enough that I decided not to. Fine as is. This would also be a blend, I believe. Fine as is. The rest of them are going to be conics. Conic, tangent, first curve, end. Tangent, second curve, end. Fill it in. Conic, T-enter for tangent. Pick your first curve, come to the end. T-enter for tangent. Pick your second curve, click at the end. Fill it in. That's actually a blend curve. Conic, T-enter to select tangent. Pick your first curve. Click at the end, T-enter to select the tangent options, click your second curve, click on the end. Conic, T-enter to select the tangent option, select your curve, click at the end, tangent option again, second curve, click at the end, fill it in. This one's a blend curve. Adjust it back, just that, and that's fine. Okay, edit. You don't have to do this because you wouldn't have put points in, but I put those little reference points in and they're bothering me. So I'm just going to select all the points and delete them. Okay, I'm going to join all of these together. Of course, it'll only join what can be joined. It's decided to make them all white. I want them blue for my blue layer. Okay. The last thing I'm going to do is use this as a trim tool. click off the ends. Okay. And then I'm going to select these. Trim out those ends. Join that all together. I have a couple of veins I'm going to draw using my freeform Interpolate Points. Oh, turn off my object snaps so they don't get in my way. Another one here. And I have to be careful that I don't click on the end. If I click on the end, Rhino will make a closed curve of this, and it'll be a loop. It'll just round it, and I don't want it rounded. I think those are all fine as they are. Now there's kind of a implied soft circle in here. I'm going to pull almost out. And then I'm going to go Edit, Split, select Point Object, and I'm going to split this here, 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 and here, 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 hit enter. Actually, I want to still split this piece too. Here, thought I did, and here. Now I'll take the parts in between. And I am going to mirror that to the other side. Center, 0, 0. Pull straight down to mirror straight across. And it's done. Turn off the background bitmap. Trim this away at the top. And that's how much we got traced for this tutorial. All right, class, thanks so much, and we'll see you in class. And if I can make this stop.